My heels click against the polished marble of our family's Lakeshore Drive foyer as I balance 3 perfectly wrapped presents under my arm, each one carefully selected and beautifully packaged in cream paper with gold ribbon. The familiar scent of vanilla candles mingles with the sharp December air flowing through the massive oak doors, and I can already hear Madison's laughter echoing from the living room where she's probably curled up on the leather sectional, scrolling through her phone while our parents fuss over her latest college drama. At 31, I've become an expert at arriving precisely on time for Sterling family gatherings, armed with thoughtful gifts and wearing the kind of smile that photographs well for Mom's social media posts. But if I'm being honest, there's always this tight feeling in my chest when I walk through these doors, like I'm auditioning for a role I've never quite been cast in. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family while watching them celebrate everyone else? That knot in your stomach when you realize the enthusiasm for your presence never quite matches what others receive. I've spent years telling myself I was imagining the disparity, that successful adults don't measure love in gift receipts or party planning efforts. But standing here in the entryway of my childhood home, surrounded by family photos where Madison's smile somehow always manages to be more prominently displayed than mine, I'm starting to wonder if my intuition has been more accurate than I wanted to admit. The living room sprawls before me like a magazine spread, all cream furniture and strategic lighting that makes everything look expensive and untouchable. Richard, my father, sits in his usual spot by the fireplace, still wearing his country club golf shirt despite the Chicago winter, while Claudia, my mother, hovers near the kitchen island arranging cheese and crackers on crystal platters that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Madison occupies the prime real estate of the main couch, her blonde hair perfectly curled and her outfit coordinated like she stepped out of a boutique window. She's 24 and still lives here, still gets her laundry done and her meals prepared, still operates under the assumption that the world revolves around her comfort and convenience. Harper! Mom's voice carries that particular tone she uses when she's performing enthusiasm rather than feeling it. Bright and brittle like expensive champagne flutes. We were wondering when you'd get here. Madison was just telling us about her new job at that marketing firm downtown. The comparison is immediate and inevitable because Madison's entry-level position somehow merits the same excitement as my recent promotion to senior marketing manager at Horizon PR, where I've been managing multi-million-dollar accounts and crisis communications for Fortune 500 companies. But I've learned to swallow these moments, to smile and nod and congratulate my little sister on landing a position that pays half what I make and requires a fraction of the responsibility. That's wonderful, I say, setting my gifts carefully on the coffee table where they look suddenly modest next to the towering pile of presents already assembled for Madison. I brought something for everyone. My voice sounds steady, professional even, the same tone I use when presenting quarterly results to skeptical board members. But my eyes can't help scanning the room, taking inventory of the decorations that somehow focus more heavily around Madison's designated spaces. The way the family photos on the mantel seem to feature more recent pictures of her, the subtle but unmistakable signs that this home revolves around one particular gravitational center. The afternoon unfolds with the predictable rhythm of Sterling family gatherings, all polite conversation and careful avoidance of anything too personal or challenging. I find myself falling into my familiar role as the responsible older daughter who asks thoughtful questions and offers appropriate compliments while Madison holds court with stories about her new colleagues and weekend adventures. Every so often, I catch myself watching my parents' faces, noting the way their expressions brighten when she speaks, the quality of attention she receives that feels different from the polite interest directed my way. It's subtle enough that I could dismiss it, rational enough that I could blame my own sensitivity, but persistent enough that I've started to trust what I'm observing rather than what I'm supposed to feel. When gift opening time arrives, the real performance begins, and I settle into my usual spot on the side chair, the one that gives me a perfect view of the family dynamics, but somehow always leaves me feeling like I'm watching rather than participating. The pile of presents for Madison seems to have grown while I wasn't looking, and the excitement in the room ratchets up several notches as she reaches for the first beautifully wrapped box. I take a sip of my wine and prepare myself for whatever disparity is about to unfold, reminding myself that at 31, with my own apartment and career and independent life, I shouldn't need my parents' validation to feel worthy. But as Madison squeals with delight over her first gift, I can't shake the feeling that tonight is going to teach me something important about where I actually stand in this family's hierarchy of care. The first gift Madison unwraps is a designer handbag, the kind with a waiting list and a price tag that makes my mortgage payment look modest. The leather gleams under the crystal chandelier light, and the gold hardware catches the reflection from the fireplace as she holds it up for everyone to admire. "Oh my God, Mom, this is the exact one I showed you from that influencer's Instagram," she squeals, jumping up to hug Claudia with the kind of uninhibited joy that fills the entire room. I watch my father beam with pride, his chest literally puffing out, as he explains how he had to call in favors at the boutique to secure it before Christmas. The bag probably costs more than I spent on all three of their gifts combined, but more than the money, it's the obvious research and effort that stings. Someone was paying attention to Madison's casual mentions and social media likes. Someone was taking notes and making calls. Gift after gift emerges from Madison's pile, each one more thoughtfully curated than the last. A cashmere sweater in the exact shade of blush pink she mentioned loving during Thanksgiving dinner. A set of professional makeup brushes from that brand she follows religiously on TikTok. A delicate gold necklace with her birthstone that catches the light perfectly against her skin. Each present receives enthusiastic documentation, with Mom positioning herself for selfies and Dad offering to take photos that will undoubtedly make their way to the country club friends group chat. The room buzzes with genuine excitement, and I find myself genuinely happy for Madison, even as something hollow opens up in my chest. She deserves to be celebrated. She deserves parents who pay attention to her interests and invest in her happiness. But watching this level of intentional love makes me realize how different my own experience has been. Maybe you felt this too, sitting in your own family's living room and suddenly seeing the patterns that were always there but somehow invisible until they weren't. The way enthusiasm has levels, the way attention comes in different qualities, the way some people's joy becomes everyone's priority, while others learn to celebrate themselves. I take another sip of wine and try to focus on being present for Madison's happiness, rather than cataloging the growing evidence of what my own gift-opening experience is likely to look like. But my mind keeps wandering to Christmases past, to birthdays where my gifts felt more obligatory than inspired, to moments when I wondered if anyone was really paying attention to who I was becoming as a person. When Madison finally reaches the largest box wrapped in silver paper, with an enormous white bow that probably cost more than some people's entire gift budget. The energy in the room shifts to something almost electric. Dad positions himself with his phone ready to record, and Mom clasps her hands together like she's watching a proposal or a graduation. Madison tears through the wrapping with the confidence of someone who has never been disappointed by what's inside. And when the PlayStation 5 emerges in all its sleek technological glory, her scream could probably be heard 3 houses down. "No fucking way!" she shouts, forgetting herself in the moment. And instead of being scolded for language, everyone laughs like it's the most charming thing they've ever heard. The PS5 sits there like a monument to thoughtful gift-giving, complete with extra controllers, a selection of games, and a gaming headset that suggests someone did serious research into what would make this gift complete rather than just adequate. Dad launches into an explanation of how he had to monitor stock alerts for weeks and drive to 3 different stores to secure everything, while Mom adds details about how they coordinated with Madison's friends to make sure they got games she didn't already own. The level of coordination and effort is genuinely impressive, and I find myself wondering when anyone last put that kind of energy into understanding what might make me happy. But it's the bow that really gets me. That enormous, perfectly tied white bow that transforms the entire presentation from a simple purchase into a moment of ceremony. Someone spent time on that bow. Someone cared about the visual impact and the photogenic moment and the memory that would be created. Someone wanted Madison to feel special, not just about the gift itself, but about being worth the effort of making it beautiful. As she poses for pictures with her new gaming system, surrounded by parents who glow with the satisfaction of a surprise perfectly executed, I realize I'm about to discover exactly where I rank in this family's hierarchy of thoughtful consideration. After Madison's gift extravaganza finally winds down, attention turns to the modest collection of presents I brought, and I watch my family open them with the kind of polite appreciation reserved for obligatory exchanges. Dad holds up the leather portfolio I selected for his home office, running his fingers over the quality craftsmanship before setting it aside with a brief, very thoughtful Harper. Mom examines the cashmere scarf I chose to complement her winter coat collection, draping it briefly around her shoulders before folding it neatly back into its box. Madison actually seems genuinely pleased with the artisanal skincare set I curated specifically for her sensitive skin, but even her enthusiasm feels muted compared to the fireworks that accompanied her own present opening just minutes earlier. The contrast isn't lost on me, though I paste on my practiced smile and express gratitude for their polite acknowledgement. Then Mom disappears into the hallway, and I hear her rummaging around in what sounds like the laundry room, accompanied by Dad's muttered complaints about where they put Harper's things. The delay stretches long enough that Madison starts scrolling through her phone again, already absorbed in photographing her new gifts for social media, while I sit in the growing silence wondering what exactly requires this level of searching. When Mom finally returns, she's carrying what can only be described as a collection of items rather than actual wrapped presents, and the apologetic expression on her face tells me everything I need to know before she even starts speaking. "Harper, honey, we've been so busy with Madison's college graduation and everything, and your father's been traveling for work." Mom's voice trails off as she sets down a plastic laundry basket filled with what appears to be a random assortment of household items. "We wanted to make sure you had some practical things you could use." The euphemism hangs in the air like expensive perfume that can't quite mask an unpleasant smell, and I find myself staring at the contents of the basket with the kind of fascination usually reserved for car accidents or natural disasters. There are socks, used socks. I can tell they're used because they have that slightly gray tinge that comes from multiple wash cycles, and one pair still has a small hole near the toe that someone attempted to mend with mismatched thread. There's a collection of kitchen utensils that look suspiciously like the ones that went missing from my college apartment years ago, now scarred and worn from extensive use. A few books with broken spines and coffee stains suggest they've been pulled from various rooms around the house, chosen more for their availability than their relevance to my interests. At the bottom of the basket, nestled between a half-empty bottle of generic hand lotion and a package of travel-sized tissues, sits what might once have been a nice candle before someone burned it down to an uneven stub of wax. If you've ever questioned whether you're being dramatic about family treatment, you're not alone. Sitting there looking at my gift basket of household cast-offs while Madison's PS5 gleams like a technological altar just 6 feet away, I realize this isn't about money or even effort. This is about the message being sent, intentionally or not, about where each daughter ranks in terms of consideration and care. The used socks aren't just thoughtless, they're actually more insulting than receiving nothing at all, because they suggest that whatever was convenient and available was considered sufficient for me. The socks are really good quality, Dad adds helpfully, as if the thread count might somehow transform this moment into something less devastating. Your mother noticed you mentioned needing some warm ones for winter. I want to point out that I mentioned needing warm socks approximately 3 years ago, and that the ones in the basket are clearly summer weight cotton with holes, but the words stick in my throat like expensive jewelry that's too tight. Instead, I hear myself thanking them with the same professional courtesy I use with difficult clients, my voice steady and grateful, even as something fundamental shifts in my understanding of my place in this family's ecosystem. Madison looks up from her phone long enough to offer a sympathetic smile, but she's already back to arranging her new gaming setup, completely absorbed in the world of thoughtful gifts and careful attention that constitutes her normal reality. As I gather my laundry basket of leftovers and prepare to leave, I catch my reflection in the hallway mirror and see something different in my eyes. Not anger, exactly, but a kind of clarity that feels both liberating and terrifying. There's a difference between being forgotten and being erased. And tonight I've learned exactly which category I occupy in the Sterling family mythology. Back in my downtown apartment, I set the laundry basket on my kitchen counter and stare at it like it might suddenly transform into something that makes sense. The contrast between my sleek granite surfaces and this collection of household rejects feels almost surreal, like someone dropped a garage sale into the middle of a design magazine spread. I pull out my phone and, before I can second guess myself, take a photo of the basket's contents arranged exactly as my parents presented them. Not for social media, not for revenge, but because I need documentation of this moment before I start rationalizing it away or convincing myself that I'm overreacting to what might have been simple thoughtlessness. The photo is devastating in its clarity. Used socks with visible holes, kitchen utensils that clearly came from someone else's junk drawer, books with broken spines and coffee rings, a burned-down candle stub that someone couldn't be bothered to throw away. Arranged together like this, the collection tells a story about how much thought and care went into my Christmas experience. And it's not a story that reflects well on anyone involved. I find myself wondering if my parents would be mortified to see their gift documented this way, or if they're so accustomed to treating me as an afterthought that they wouldn't even recognize the problem. My fingers betray me, opening Facebook with the muscle memory of someone who has spent too many evenings scrolling through other people's curated happiness. I don't intend to look for my family's posts, but Madison's Christmas celebration photos have already started appearing in my feed, her face radiant with joy as she poses with her PS5, the enormous white bow positioned perfectly in the background. The engagement is immediate and enthusiastic, with comments pouring in from friends and family members about how lucky she is to have such thoughtful parents. "Your mom and dad are the best," someone writes. "They always go all out for you," adds another. Each comment feels like a small knife, not because Madison doesn't deserve the celebration, but because it highlights exactly how different our experiences are within the same family system. I wish someone had told me earlier that documentation isn't paranoia when the pattern is real. Sitting in my apartment with the evidence of tonight's disparity spread across my counter, I realize this isn't an isolated incident, but part of a larger story I've been too close to see clearly. I open my laptop and create a new folder, something I've never done before, but that suddenly feels necessary. Christmas 2024 goes into the folder, along with the photo of my gifts and screenshots of Madison's celebration posts. Then, because the pattern is starting to crystallize in my mind, I begin scrolling backward through social media and my own photos, looking for other examples of this disparity. My birthday dinner last March, where we went to Madison's favorite restaurant and spent most of the evening discussing her spring break plans. Her birthday dinner 2 months later at the exclusive steakhouse downtown where Dad made a toast about his precious younger daughter, and Mom presented her with a diamond tennis bracelet. My college graduation, where I got a brief congratulations and a check for $500. Madison's graduation last spring, complete with a family vacation to Europe and professional photography session. The evidence accumulates with depressing consistency, each memory suddenly recontextualized through the lens of systematic difference. But it's not just the big events, it's the small moments too, the casual ways attention and enthusiasm get distributed unevenly. The way my professional achievements get acknowledged with polite interest while Madison's entry-level job stories receive rapt attention. The way my apartment gets brief, obligatory visits while Madison's room at home gets regularly redecorated. The way my relationships get surface-level inquiries while Madison's dating life becomes family entertainment. Pattern recognition hits like expensive perfume, overwhelming and impossible to ignore once you've identified the scent. As I close my laptop and prepare for bed, I catch myself making a decision that surprises me with its clarity. I'm not going to pretend this is normal anymore. I'm not going to smile graciously and accept whatever scraps of attention my family offers while watching Madison receive the full banquet of their care and consideration. Tomorrow, I'm going to start living like someone who deserves better than used socks from the laundry basket, someone whose Christmas morning should involve actual thought and effort rather than whatever happens to be convenient. The question isn't whether I'm worth more than this treatment. The question is whether I'm finally ready to stop accepting less than I deserve. The conversation happens 3 days after Christmas, and I'm standing in my parents' marble foyer again, but this time I'm not carrying carefully wrapped presents or wearing my accommodating daughter smile. This time I'm carrying my laptop and a printed folder containing what I've started thinking of as the evidence, though calling it that makes me feel simultaneously justified and slightly ridiculous. The house feels different when you're not trying to fit into its rhythm, when you're not performing gratitude for whatever scraps of attention get thrown your way. The vanilla candles smell cloying instead of welcoming, and the perfect staging feels more like a museum than a home. "Harper, what a nice surprise," Mom says, though her tone suggests my unannounced visit is anything but nice. She's wearing her country club tennis outfit, all crisp whites and subtle logos that communicate status without being obvious about it. Dad emerges from his study wearing the expression he reserves for unexpected interruptions, the same look he gives solicitors and salespeople who have the audacity to ring the doorbell during his evening news routine. Madison, thankfully, is at her new job, which means this conversation can happen without an audience member who might complicate the dynamics. "We need to talk," I say, and something in my voice must communicate that this isn't a request because both of my parents settle into their usual positions in the living room with the wariness of people who sense trouble but can't quite identify its source. I set my laptop on the coffee table and open it to the folder I've been building, the digital archive of Sterling family gift disparity that tells a story neither of them is going to enjoy hearing. I want to show you something, and I want you to really look at it. The photos speak for themselves in a way that words never could. Madison's Christmas haul spread across the couch like a luxury department store display, complete with professional-level lighting and careful composition. My laundry basket of cast-offs, photographed with the same attention to detail that makes the contrast impossible to dismiss. Birthday celebrations spanning the past 3 years, showing Madison's elaborate parties complete with decorated venues and thoughtful guest lists compared to my quiet dinners where the conversation inevitably centers on her upcoming events. Professional achievements, with Madison's entry-level marketing position receiving the same enthusiasm as my promotion to senior manager overseeing multi-million-dollar accounts. "Harper, honey, I think you're being a little dramatic," Mom starts, but her voice lacks its usual confidence. She's looking at the photos with the expression of someone seeing their own behavior reflected back for the first time, and it's clearly not a comfortable experience. "We love you both equally, we just express it differently." The explanation sounds weak even to her own ears, and Dad shifts uncomfortably in his chair like he's trying to distance himself from whatever accountability might be heading his way. "Different how?" I ask, and my voice has the same measured tone I use during crisis management calls when clients try to deflect responsibility for obvious mistakes. Madison gets a $500 gaming system with extra controllers and games, meticulously researched and beautifully presented. I get used socks from the laundry basket. Help me understand how that represents equal love expressed differently. The silence that follows feels expensive, like the moments before a stock market crash when everyone realizes the numbers don't add up but nobody wants to be the first to acknowledge the problem. Dad clears his throat with the authority of someone accustomed to being taken seriously, but when he speaks, his words carry less conviction than usual. "You're older, you're established, you don't need the same kind of support Madison needs. We thought you'd appreciate practical gifts." The logic is so flawed it would be laughable if it weren't so revealing about how they actually think about our respective positions in the family hierarchy. As if being successful means settling for whatever leftover attention remains after everyone else's needs are met, as if financial independence should translate to emotional neglect. Let me get this straight, I say, closing my laptop and looking directly at both of them. Because I've worked hard to build a career and support myself. Because I've never asked you for money or help with basic adult responsibilities. Because I've been the easy child who doesn't require constant management. Your response is to give me literal garbage while lavishing thoughtful attention on Madison. Does that sound like a reward system that makes any sense to you? The question hangs in the air like expensive perfume turned sour, and I watch my parents exchange the kind of look that suggests they're realizing their comfortable narrative about family dynamics might need some serious revision. The aftermath of that conversation unfolds exactly as I expected it would, which is to say, badly. Mom calls me 2 days later with the wounded tone she reserves for moments when her version of reality gets challenged by inconvenient facts, explaining that she and Dad have been discussing my concerns and they feel I'm reading too much into normal family dynamics. The phrase makes me laugh out loud because there's nothing normal about giving one daughter a gaming system while handing the other daughter used socks. But I've learned that pointing out obvious truths to people who aren't ready to hear them is an exercise in futility. Madison, predictably, gets pulled into the middle of things when Mom apparently decides that family solidarity requires everyone to agree that my reaction was unreasonable. According to the carefully edited version that makes its way back to me through Madison's guilty phone call, I'm being too sensitive about Christmas gifts and making drama where none existed. The irony isn't lost on me that the daughter who received thoughtful, expensive presents is being asked to validate the appropriateness of giving the other daughter household refuse. But family dynamics have never been particularly concerned with logical consistency. What surprises me is how little the pushback bothers me. For years, I've been so invested in maintaining family harmony that I've swallowed my own legitimate concerns rather than risk being labeled difficult or demanding. But sitting in my apartment, looking at the documentation I've assembled of this systematic disparity, I realize that being called dramatic by people who think used socks are appropriate Christmas gifts doesn't actually carry much weight. If anything, their defensive reaction confirms that they know exactly how inappropriate their behavior has been. They're just more committed to protecting their comfort than addressing the problem. The real revelation comes during a conversation with my colleague Jennifer, who's been watching me process this situation with the kind of supportive attention I wish I received from my actual family. We're having coffee at the upscale cafe near our office, surrounded by other professionals who presumably have families that treat them with basic respect, when she asks the question that changes everything. Harper, if your best friend told you her parents gave her sister a PS5 for Christmas and gave her used socks from the laundry basket, what would you tell her? The answer is immediate and obvious, and hearing myself say it out loud makes me realize how thoroughly I've been gaslighting myself about what constitutes acceptable treatment. I tell her that's not about the money, it's about the message, I hear myself saying. I'd tell her that nobody accidentally gives one child thoughtful gifts and another child garbage. I'd tell her that her parents are telling her exactly how much she matters to them, and she should believe what they're showing her rather than what they're saying. Jennifer nods with the satisfaction of someone who has successfully guided a friend toward an important realization, and I feel something fundamental shift in my understanding of what I'm willing to accept going forward. The decision crystallizes slowly, then, all at once, the way expensive perfume settles into its true scent after the initial spray. I'm not going to family gatherings where I'm treated as an afterthought while Madison receives the full spectrum of parental attention and care. I'm not going to pretend that systematic neglect is a quirky family trait that I should learn to appreciate. I'm not going to perform gratitude for whatever scraps of consideration my parents decide to offer while they lavish thoughtful attention on my sister. Most importantly, I'm not going to allow their defensive reactions to convince me that documenting unequal treatment somehow makes me the problem in this scenario. When Madison calls to invite me to their New Year's Eve celebration, I surprise both of us by declining. "I've made other plans," I tell her, which isn't technically true yet, but will be by the time the evening arrives. I'm starting the new year by prioritizing relationships where I feel valued and appreciated. The silence on her end suggests she understands exactly what I'm referring to. And when she doesn't try to argue or convince me otherwise, I realize that even she recognizes the disparity I've been documenting. The difference is that acknowledging it would require her to confront the uncomfortable reality of her privileged position in our family's affection economy, and that's apparently too high a price for her to pay for my emotional well-being. 6 months later, I'm standing in the kitchen of my newly purchased condo, arranging fresh peonies in a crystal vase I bought myself for no reason other than the fact that I wanted something beautiful in my space. The morning light streams through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook the Chicago River, and everything about this moment feels deliberately chosen rather than accidentally inherited. The promotion to creative director at Horizon PR came with a substantial salary increase, and for the first time in my adult life, I'm spending money on myself with the same thoughtfulness my parents reserved for Madison's gifts. The difference is profound and healing in ways I didn't expect. The family dynamics have settled into a new rhythm that feels both strange and liberating. My parents occasionally reach out with invitations to dinner or family events, but their tone carries the careful politeness reserved for acquaintances rather than the casual assumption of availability they once took for granted. Madison sends periodic text messages with updates about her life, but without the shared experience of family gatherings, our conversations have revealed how little substance existed beneath the surface of our sisterly relationship. The revelation isn't particularly painful anymore. It's simply information about the reality of our connection, rather than the fantasy I'd been maintaining. What has surprised me is how much emotional energy I've recovered by stepping away from the constant work of managing other people's comfort with my legitimate needs. The mental space previously occupied by rationalizing my parents' behavior and convincing myself that crumbs of attention were sufficient nourishment is now available for relationships that actually feed my soul. Jennifer and I have developed the kind of friendship I'd always wanted with Madison, built on mutual respect and genuine interest in each other's well-being. My colleague Marcus, who was promoted to senior manager around the same time as my own advancement, has become the kind of chosen family member who remembers my birthday without being prompted and celebrates my professional achievements with authentic enthusiasm. The turning point came last month when my parents sent Madison and me identical birthday cards, clearly purchased from the same store at the same time, containing identical checks for $100. The gesture was so obviously calculated to demonstrate equal treatment that it felt more insulting than the original disparity, like they'd learned to perform fairness without understanding what genuine care actually looks like. I deposited the check and sent a polite thank you text, But the interaction felt hollow in a way that confirmed how little interest I have in relationships based on obligation rather than authentic connection. My birthday celebration that weekend, organized by friends who know me well enough to plan activities I actually enjoy, felt like a masterclass in how attention and care should be distributed. Jennifer surprised me with tickets to the art exhibition I'd mentioned wanting to see. Marcus made dinner reservations at the restaurant I'd been curious about for months. And my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who has become an unexpected source of wisdom and homemade soup, brought me a bouquet of flowers from her garden simply because she thought they were beautiful. The evening was everything a celebration should be: thoughtful, personal, and focused on creating joy for the person being honored. When you stop performing for people who aren't watching, you finally get to live for yourself. The realization has been both liberating and sobering, forcing me to acknowledge how much of my energy was previously devoted to earning approval from people who had already decided I wasn't worth their full attention. Now, when I buy myself the cashmere sweater in the perfect shade of emerald green, or book the weekend spa retreat I've been craving, or invest in the professional photography session that captures exactly how I want to be seen, I'm not compensating for anyone else's neglect. I'm simply treating myself with the same thoughtfulness I wish my family had shown, and discovering that self-love is actually more satisfying than performing for an audience that was never really paying attention anyway. The family you choose will always matter more than the one that chooses to overlook you. As I arrange these beautiful flowers in my beautiful vase in my beautiful home that represents everything I've built independent of their validation, I realize that the used socks were actually a gift of sorts. They showed me exactly where I stood in my family's hierarchy of care, which freed me to stop waiting for them to value me appropriately and start creating a life where such thoughtfulness is simply the baseline rather than the exception.